Hello, I'm Ella. I've recently written an article about the current situation involving Syrian refugees and their potential return to Syria after the toppling of the Assad regime very recently. I wanted to write about this firstly because it is a current event, and I think it is a very important part of how the 21st century has and will handle refugee crises. There are 6.3 million Syrian refugees currently displaced, not in Syria, and another 7.4 million internally displaced refugees in Syria, which accounts for one of the biggest refugee crises of the 21st century. So now that the regime has fallen, there comes a question of what will happen to all these refugees. And I think that is why I wanted to write this article, because the question is very much up in the air, but there are some crucial players, including nations, the situation on the ground in Syria, and also Syrian refugees themselves and what they want to happen. Because it has been such a long conflict, Syrian communities have settled in many places around the world, the majority of them being in Turkey. There are 3 million Syrian refugees there, but also in Europe and Lebanon and other places in the Middle East. Particularly with the context of the rise of the far right, and also all of the unrest and bloodshed we are seeing in the Middle East currently. The return to Syria is a contentious subject. At the heart of it is whether countries are willing to wait and see what the new Syria will look like, and whether refugees would like to go back, and also whether Syria will be able to reconstruct itself without there being a similar situation where a new dictator were to come to power. Another reason I wanted to talk about this particular topic was because over the summer I taught English in a Turkish city called Gaziantep, known as Antep to the locals, and I taught English to Syrian refugees who were living in the city, which was very close to the Syrian border. Their willingness to learn English and also to share their own culture with me was very inspiring. You get the sense that these children that I was teaching wanted to carry on with their lives, even though some of them had only been in Turkey for a very short time and had recently escaped conflict. And now, on the borders of Turkey and Syria and Lebanon, there are queues of people going back into Syria, wanting to restart their lives, which they left. A final point on why I wanted to do this article was because I studied late Ottoman Syria in my degree. And though the period I studied was over 150 years ago, the region itself still remains as a very diverse place, both ethnically and religiously. And the worry that new government in Syria may not be secular or may be oppressive to minorities is something that Syrian refugees will no doubt be thinking about too. And in some ways it reminds me of the similar worries that people felt 150 years ago in that region. But also a desire to unite Syria and the rise of nationalism later on, and a pride for the homeland. This particular pride was summarised and fuelled by a man called Boutros al-Bustani, who wrote key pamphlets on the unification of Syria and the belief in a peaceful and just Syria. These reasons and several interests meant that I really wanted to research and write about how Syrian refugees are feeling about this new turn in events and what dangers or hopes they have for the rebuilding of Syria.